And he might play next week when they go to Vegas to face UNLV and Gonzaga. They play Gonzaga next week. And UNLV in Vegas for a pre-Thanksgiving holiday event. So that was incredible news because Pharrell Payne is their one big, and he's really good. Then you had the game last night, so they were already missing 3 starters: Pharrell Payne, Miles Rice, and Solomon Washington. 3 projected, two starters and 1 projected starter. They're in a bind against Mount St. Mary's. They're down 5 with 2 minutes to go, and Diggy Coit, who's all of 5'10", 5'11", was a prolific scorer at Northern Illinois to start his career, then went to Kansas last year to play for Bill Self, but really didn't end up getting as much time as they thought he would. He transfers in the portal to Maryland as one of Buzz Williams's 15 new players. He's thought to be, a guy that can certainly start, but worst case, he's, their scorer and their point guard off the bench. He goes for 41 last night and Diggy dug them out of a hole, a 5-point hole with 2 minutes to go. He had a 3-point play the hard way, the old way, nailed a 3-pointer as we played coming in to tie the game, and Maryland survived Mount St. Mary's in overtime, 95-90. Mount St. Mary's was a tournament team last year. They play a schedule, early in the season before they get into the conference. Like they played West Virginia, they played Cincinnati, they're playing Ohio State. They typically play, a lot of good schools early. Maryland was a 17.5-point favorite last night, so this was not expected. But Coit going for 41 on 11 of 17 from the floor, 8 of 10 from behind the arc. The big concern after they lost to Georgetown, we don't have any shooters. They got shooters. They got guys that have good strokes and can make them. They were 12 of 27 last night. You'll take 44% any night of the week. They also got to the free throw line 47 times to Mount St. Mary's 16. Their 5-star freshman, Darius Adams, 17 of 21 from the free throw line. I know some people say he's a 4-star, 5-star, whatever. I'm calling him a 5-star. He was close enough, and in some publications, he was a 5-star. And they survived 95-90 in overtime. Coit's 41, by the way, the most points ever scored in a game at Xfinity Center. It opened in 2003, the year after the national championship. No one's ever scored that many points in a game. Now, the Maryland record, he was within 3 points of the record. Ernie Graham in 1978, as part of the, Albert King. Ernie Graham was a sophomore that year in 78. He scored in a early season December game against NC State, 44. That's still the Maryland record. Gravis Vasquez had 41 at Virginia Tech in 2010. But Ernie Graham still holds the all-time single-game scoring mark for the Terps with 44. Those of you that are my age or older remember that if they had a 3-point line in 1978, it would have been 50 or 51 that night because he was hitting bombs all over the place. Ernie Graham was one of the great streaky kind of scorers and shooters of the day in the ACC. And for Maryland, those teams were pretty good teams. They were tournament teams, Sweet 16 teams. In 1980, they lost to Georgetown in the Sweet 16. But Ernie Graham still holds the record. So Coit, had that game gone to maybe one more overtime, he may have set the school record last night. So a really good day to be a Terp and be a basketball Terp fan. They had a lot of good news. I'm gonna end with this though. In today's day and age in hoops, college hoops, the recruiting of high school players is not as important as the recruiting of the transfer portal. It just isn't. To get a really good player who's 20, 21, 22, or 23 years old and is a grown man is a big difference from getting the 16, 17, 18-year-old who's one of the top 5, top 10 players in the country. You just are, teams that have really done well in recent years have had older teams that they have brought up through the portal. Now, there are schools like Purdue that just kind of recruit and then keep their own players. Their backcourt of Hoyer and Smith is in their fourth year together. They're number one in the country. Izzo, year in and year out. We see what Tom Izzo does. And my God, last night or 2 nights ago, was it last night or 2 nights ago? They smothered Kentucky. I saw the graphic. It's like Kentucky paid $22 million for their players. Michigan State paid $3.5 million for theirs. I mean, Izzo and Painter are in an elite class. They've got real unique situations. But for the most part, it's better to recruit the portal well than it is to recruit high school well. I'm not putting a damper on this signing. I can't wait to see the kid. There will be a ton of buzz for Baba going into next season. And look, they've started off this season 4-1 with a couple of big games next week and getting hopefully healthier over the next few weeks as well. But an exciting day. By the way, I didn't even mention last night, Derek Queen, the first-round pick of the Pelicans. We've talked about the start to the season that he's off to. Derek Queen inserted into the starting lineup like 3 or 4 games ago against the player that people sort of compared him to. They called Derek Queen last year when he got to College Park Baby Jokic. He modeled his game after Nikola Jokic. He played Nikola Jokic last night for the first time. New Orleans is terrible. Derek Queen's on New Orleans. Queen against Jokic, and it was, they matched up against each other. Derek Queen, 30 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, and 2 block shots. Jokic's team won. Jokic had 28, 12, and 11, typical triple-double. But do we have that sound of what Jokic said about Queen afterwards?
I do.
Play it. That's him talking about Peyton Watson. That's not him talking about Queen. The next question, I think, is about Queen. Yeah. So you heard the follow-up questions to the first one about Derek Queen. That's who he was talking about. Yeah, Derek Queen is a special, unique talent and really does. If you saw him last year in College Park, we started talking about him early in the year. That comparison to the way Jokic plays is apt. Is he going to be Jokic? I mean, Jokic right now is one of the greatest players that's ever lived, people. I know most of you aren't following the NBA, but Nikola Jokic is you're watching, if you watch him, whenever you watch him, you're watching one of the greatest players that's ever played basketball in the prime of his career at 29 or 30 years old. He's that great. He's averaging, once again, a triple-double from the center position. Averaging right now 29.1 points per game, 13.2 rebounds per game, 11.1 assists per game. I mean, when all is said and done, I don't think we're going to talk about him ahead of Jordan. I don't know that we're going to talk about him ahead of LeBron and, some of the others that would be in this short conversation. But he's going to be on most people's top 5 list. No worse than a top 6 or 7 list. And he's still got a long way to go. Now, for him, for Jokic, he's got to, this is a sport where it gets measured by rings as much as any other sport. And he's got 1. He's got to go get, another 1 or 2, I would guess. And then you put him with 3 rings, let's just say, at the end of his career in 5, 6, 7 years. Now we're talking about almost a lock to be considered one of the 3 or 4 greatest that ever played. That was a lot of basketball to open up the show, wasn't it? Let's get to some football next.
I think the Terps deserved it, but
deserved what?
Deserved the talk, deserved the hype. It
Yeah,
was a big night for the Terps.
Yesterday was a crazy, crazy day for Maryland basketball. And look, this season, I have no idea how it's going to go. And when Baba gets to school next year, every college basketball, even more so than college football, because just 1 to 2 players can legitimately totally change the fortune of a team. And you just don't know who those players are because there's so much changing. There's so much transfer portal, action going on. And you just don't know what these teams are going to look like. And, even now, like I'm looking at the rankings, it's really hard to. Last year, Kansas and North Carolina. Kansas was like, preseason 1 or 2. I mean, they had a terrible season. North Carolina was supposed to be really good. No. Right now, I'll tell you what, Houston, you pretty much know is going to be there. They're just so well coached, and they basically recruit the same kind of players, and they keep them like Purdue does. UConn's 3, they lost to Arizona last night. Man, Arizona's good. That kid, that freshman Koa Pete is something else. Duke's 5, but, in terms of a lot of these teams, it's going to take a month or two, and I can't tell you what Maryland's going to be this year because they've been missing 2 of their best players, projected starters, and last night, a 3rd projected starter. So we'll see what happens when we get into conference play. But they do have an interesting next week going out to Vegas to play UNLV, who at this point is 2-2, I think. They beat Memphis the other night, but then they'll play 12th-ranked Gonzaga. And by the way, I think that game literally starts at like midnight Eastern or something like that. Or maybe it's the UNLV game that starts at midnight Eastern. But Gonzaga obviously will be the biggest test they've had. They've got quite the non-conference schedule. They still play UVA on the road down in Charlottesville. And one of their first 2 December Big Ten games is against number 7 Michigan. So they're going to play 2 top 12 teams over the next 2.5 weeks. We'll see. It's early, though. But a good day for Maryland hoops. Let's get to some football when we come back. This from Lenny. Lenny writes, I have a problem with Jaden Daniels playing this year. There's no way after 3 different injuries that a 4th isn't going to happen. Man, that's okay. If he plays this year, I'm going to go crazy like some of your callers and start calling for the firing of everybody. This is really going to be a conversation, isn't it, when he gets cleared? It's going to be a conversation. I just couldn't feel more differently than you, Lenny. First of all, I do not want him to play if he's not cleared 100%. This is not he's good to go, with this big game against Philadelphia coming up, a game we have to have. He's good enough to go. No. No, I would hope that we're all on the same page, that he has to be 100% healthy. Like nothing with the knee, nothing with the hamstring, nothing with the arm. Those are the 3 different injuries, right, Max? Knee, Green Bay, hamstring against the Cowboys, arm, elbow against Seattle. Those are the 3.
Yep.
I'm not missing any.
No.
Right. I don't know how you say a 4th. There's no way that a 4th isn't going to happen. I mean, a 4th could happen, and it probably will at some point, but there's no guarantee that it's going to happen this year unless they were to put him out there not healthy. No one's advocating for that. I don't think they are. But it would be absolutely absurd to me if he's fully healthy and ready to play to not play him if there are 5 games left in the season, nearly a third of the season. Look, I think there are things that have to happen with him going back out there. It, by the way, has nothing to do with personnel. If he doesn't have his full allotment of guys, I'm still putting him out there. But I'm really talking about more from, a management standpoint. First of all, you cannot allow him to be on the field at the end of a game where it's 38-14, dropping back and running RPOs. Okay, so hopefully they learned that lesson. Like, they're not going to put him at risk in a meaningless spot. That was ridiculous. That was malpractice. They can't do that again. They can't do the thing they did in the opener last year against Tampa Bay in a 37-13 game with 2 minutes to go, having him run one zone read after another, where he's keeping it and he's getting mangled at the goal line. I would completely cut out every designed run other than a quarterback draw. But the quarterback counters, the quarterback powers, take them out of the playbook, because you're guaranteed at the end of those plays to get your quarterback tackled in the field of play. 90% probability. Zone reads, it's more like 50-50 you'll get tackled. More times than not, there's an opportunity to get to the sideline. There's an opportunity to slide if he makes the right decisions. But I'd even limit the zone reads to a certain degree. I'd certainly limit the zone read keepers, which would mean that they're not actually zone reads. He's actually not reading the play, but it looks like the play, but you give it to the back. I would definitely, depending on the opponent, try to run the football. Try to keep the defense off the field, keep the game close. Don't put them into a position where you're down 21 and need to throw the football in drop back mode the entire game. There are things that need to happen going into games that truly don't matter in terms of the standings. We're not doing everything we need to do, including putting our quarterback at a higher risk than normal, because winning this game keeps us in playoff contention. So I'm with everybody on those kinds of things, but God, man, you can't. There are a couple of things in play here. If you were to shut it down for the season, and he's completely healthy, okay, in this particular proof, we have a given, which is he's completely healthy. So we're not talking about, he is not 100%. No one, I don't think, in their right mind should want to put him back out onto the field unless everything is operating at 100%. But if everything's operating at 100% and you keep him off the field for, say, 4 or 5 games, let's say it's 6. What if he's cleared before Denver next week? I don't think that'll happen. From what I'm hearing, the earliest would be the Minnesota game the following week. the first game in December, which would be the first of 5 games to finish up the season, which is almost a third of the season. There's no way you can keep. First of all, you're going to cause a problem with him. They're he's a team player. He is a competitor, but you're going to create an environment with him that would not be healthy. Like what? There are 5 games left, not 1 game left. I'm the starting quarterback. Number 2 is, how do you explain to the rest of your locker room that, in this season in particular, where you got guys going out there that in some cases are not anywhere near healthy enough to play, but because you don't have any other choices, you got to put them out there. How are you going to explain to the rest of your locker room that you're going to sit a healthy Jaden Daniels for 5 games for nearly a third of the season? No, that there are lots of repercussions to not playing a 100% healthy Jaden Daniels. And the idea that you're saving him, for next year and you're, avoiding the next injury. He needs reps. He needs to play. They need to get, and my hope is that he's out there with Terry, with Noah Brown, with Ertz, with a healthy offensive line, with, maybe some clarity on who the real true number 1 back is by the time we get there. Looks like it might be leaning towards Rodriguez, and maybe, look, Cliff's got to get, a couple of games. They got to see what this team actually could have been. You might say, well, what's the benefit of that? Well, it dictates some of the offseason decisions you'll have to make. It's not like Mariota doesn't give them a really good opportunity to evaluate. This isn't a situation where you're putting in a backup quarterback that's like, oh boy, we can't even evaluate what's around him. No, Mariota gives you that chance. He is a professional backup and in this kind of a system, he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. No, 100% he's out there. Sorry. And the idea that 3 injuries this year, all 3 being completely different, it'd be one thing if all 3 were knee injuries, all 3 were throwing shoulder injuries. The last one was, an elbow, and, we understand but no, I don't see that at all. I don't, if he were to come out 100% healthy and play and get hurt again, I'm not going to be calling for anybody's head. I'm going to be more upset if they don't play him if he's completely healthy. I don't think that is going to be the right decision. I think if he doesn't play again, it will be, and they should use it as the reason, he's just not there 100%, and we don't want to put him out there. And then if they get to the final 2 games, now we're talking about a different conversation. If he isn't cleared until, week 17 against the Cowboys on Christmas Day, before eventually the week 18 game, the 17th game of the season against the Eagles, okay, maybe. No, I want to see him play. We'll talk some college football with Denton next.
All right, we start off with the Caps. They get a big win last night over the Oilers. Big night for both Tom Wilson and Ryan Leonard as they notch 2 goals apiece. Logan Thompson saves 26 of 30, below average, .867 save percentage. But hey, cut you a break when you're playing against McDavid and Draisaitl. The Wizards, they lose to the T-Wolves 120-109. They fall to 1-13. Keyshawn George leads the team with 23.7 rebounds and 7 assists. The Wizards take the top spot in the NBA draft lottery with 14%. They share that among the top 3 teams. And tonight, we've got Thursday Night Football on tap between the Texans and the Bills. Pre-game coverage will get underway on the Team 980 at 7 p.m. Kickoff set for 8:15. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch Denton's office throughout all of football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us. Turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
All right, talking college football with Denton Day, as we do every Thursday in this spot at the Denton Day on X on Twitter. Denton is the host of College Football Overtime and other college football shows on Sirius XM. He's also the host of our Commanders pre and post game shows on 980 and 106.7 The Fan. No pre and post game show this week during a bye week. We get to take a week off from painful losses. Some of them not even painful. Some of them, kind of easy. They're over quickly. I did see you tweet out about Ruben Bain, the edge defensive end for the University of Miami. I guess he was mocked in a recent, I think, Matt Miller mock draft to Washington, and you quoted the pick. I'd streak the National Mall if Ruben Bain is available at number 7. We would not want you to do that. But you're in love with Ruben Bain. I am too. Like, I think he is a massive impact player. But tell everybody, if we end up with the number 7 pick overall and it's Ruben Bain from Miami, what they'd be getting.
Well, first of all, it'd give me a great incentive to get in shape between now and the draft. That's the best defense.
You're usually in shape,
though.
You do the 13 for 13 thing every day, don't you?
Not streaking shape. Yeah, there's a difference. You know what I mean?
What is that 13? What is it? 13 incline for 13 minutes at?
You have me. I don't do that. I run occasionally. I don't do that.
Well, you used to. You did that thing, didn't you? I thought you did.
It's 3-3-20. I think
3-3-20.
10, something like that. Yeah, 30 minutes. 3 speed.
Yeah, because 13 incline would be very difficult. Most only go to 12 anyway.
Tough. Right. But Bain is the best defensive player in the class. He's the best defensive edge, and it feels like he would be for sure, impact player immediately with the potential of becoming a game wrecker over the course of time. I don't know that there's a lot of guys that immediately are game wreckers when they get drafted. Maybe very, very few. Myles Garrett was kind of that. Von Miller was that at a time. I don't know that Ruben Bain week 1 is a game wrecker, but he's an immediate impact player on the defense for a position of need that is like top priority. I don't care what anyone says. They need a game wrecker and a great defensive pass rusher on that defense. It makes everybody better in the back end. So I would love it if they can get him. I mean, the fact that he was projected at 7, I didn't read that entire Matt Miller thing, so I don't know who he had going ahead of him. But it feels like he at worst is going 4. Hence the reason why I would be so happy that I'd be streaking if the Skins acquire him.
There's been a lot of talk that Arvell Reese from Ohio State will end up being the first defensive player taken.
Who's also very good, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I do wonder, though, with these Ohio State guys, because I've seen Caleb Downs. We're in early mock draft season, but I've seen the safety Caleb Downs mocked to go very high as well. And it's not that they're not great players. I think that they are, but I do wonder sometimes the transition when you're playing with a really good defense where it's not like Miami's defense is bad, but Ruben Bain is clearly the best player and he gets the most attention and he still is able to dominate in certain games. I would take either of them for that matter, but Bain to me seems like he's the top player at that position.
All right, let's get to some college football talk. The rankings came out. I think, I'll have you answer the question. What was the biggest surprise to you in the rankings on Tuesday night?
Honestly, it was listening to Hunter Yurachek talk. I thought they were going to stop doing the talking when Mac Rhodes stepped down. It felt like
this is the chair head for the playoff,
right?
Yeah.
And it was his description of why certain teams were placed in certain areas. I thought that Alabama should be above Notre Dame. I think the resume for Alabama is better than the resume for Notre Dame, but they are counting losses more heavily than wins. And I can understand the thought process behind that. If you can't have really, really bad losses, but it does strike me as odd that you would say, and he said all this, that they have Oregon where Oregon is ranked because they really value that win they had against Penn State, despite the fact that Penn State is now awful. And there are reasons for that, but they seemingly are holding a loss against Florida State for Alabama to drag them below Notre Dame, despite the fact that when Alabama lost to Florida State ended up being a good team for the next 4 or 5 weeks. So there's a lot of confusion in how they are viewing certain teams. I've never liked that, but I don't think that Hunter Yurachek, who is now the new guy, the new committee chair, and the new guy that's going to be talking, I don't think he had a winning day in front of the microphone while he was describing all that. I thought Bama should have been over Notre Dame.
Yeah, for those that aren't following it, so, the playoff rankings come out weekly. They're obviously subject to change. These teams continue to play games. Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M have been 1, 2, 3 in order. Georgia's at 4. They're the top 3 teams I mentioned are all undefeated. And at this point, honestly, despite whatever happens the rest of the way, those 3 are in. Right? I mean, It doesn't matter if Ohio State loses to Michigan and then loses a Big Ten title game. They would still be in. They wouldn't be a first-round bye team anymore. Indiana, they finish with Purdue and then a Big Ten title game. So they're in. And A&M, after trailing 30-3 at halftime against South Carolina, came back and won. They played Texas to finish up the season. Even if they were to lose that game and lose the SEC title game, they would still be in. Do you agree with that in the 12-team playoff era now?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think any team that would have been considered in before conference championship weekend that then plays in a conference championship is going to be in regardless. We saw that last year with SMU out of a relatively weak ACC. They were considered in, they lose that, and all it did was kick somebody else out because Clemson then got the official bid, and then SMU got the at-large bid. So yeah, I don't think that any of those teams have anything to worry about the last couple weeks.
And I would suggest that, given look, Georgia could lose to Georgia Tech. And then potentially lose an SEC title game if they got there. Texas Tech could lose to West Virginia. I doubt that's going to happen, and lose a Big 12 title game. Of the top 6, Ole Miss is the first team, and I want to know if you agree with this. They're the first team that I look at, and I'm like, if they lose the Egg Bowl to Mississippi State, and by the way, don't get a chance then to participate in the SEC title game, they could be in trouble. What do you say?
I think there would be one other caveat there that would make them in trouble. If we saw a couple of years ago an unbeaten Florida State team be judged differently because they lost their quarterback, what happens if potentially maybe kind of Lane Kiffin is not their coach anymore going into the college football playoff? I think if that's the case, they're out. And assuming they lose to Mississippi State as well.
Update everybody on that story. Ole Miss is giving him some sort of ultimatum, which, by the way, he's denied. But tell everybody what's going on with Lane Kiffin.
Well, so he is a king of drama. Lane Kiffin is the coach at Ole Miss, and he is the hottest commodity on the open market for teams like Florida and LSU, who have recently fired their head coaches. And then within the last 4 days, really on Sunday and on Monday, a couple of days ago, it was alleged and kind of confirmed that the Kiffin family flew to Gainesville on Sunday to visit Florida and then to Baton Rouge on Monday to visit LSU. So Kiffin is in contention for those jobs. And then it was reported on Tuesday that he was given, or late Monday night, I guess, that he was given an ultimatum by Ole Miss of you have to decide what you are going to do by the time we play the Egg Bowl. They get a bye this weekend. And then they play the Egg Bowl. You got to give us a decision on what your future is going to be so then we can decide how we want to handle the college football playoff. It's very odd. Lane Kiffin loves these sorts of things. I mean, he is reveling in it. He tweets motivational passages from a book that he's reading every single day. I don't know if he was doing this beforehand, but he's really ratcheted up a little bit over the past couple of days. He loves this sort of drama. It's a lot of drama for a guy who I think is a good football coach, but doesn't really have a massive resume to suggest he's worth this kind of drama. He's just the hottest name available in a era of college football where it's not like there's great coaches that are available. He's just the best of the bunch. It's been very, very odd. I don't think he leaves personally, Kevin. I think they're just doing this all for show, and then he's going to sign a big extension prior to the Egg Bowl to stay at Mississippi. But this has gone on longer than I anticipated. I thought as soon as Mike Elko signed his extension that Lane Kiffin would be quick behind him. That's just, they're refed by the same agent. You get one out of the way, you do the other one. I'm stunned it has gone on as long as it has.
Let me just tell you, if he ends up taking the Florida or the LSU job, if I'm Ole Miss, I certainly say, please continue to coach us through this college football playoff. There's no way I'm cutting him loose and having the next assistant in line. Both things can happen. You've got to take advantage of the moment, and Ole Miss has a moment right now. They've got a really good chance to not only be in the playoff, but be a very dangerous team, when they get there. So, that's the top six: Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Georgia, Texas Tech, and Ole Miss. And then for those of you, again, not paying attention, Oregon was 7, Oklahoma was 8, Notre Dame was 9, Alabama was 10. What Denton explained, that was kind of the controversy. Alabama coming in at 10 below Notre Dame. Notre Dame's got 2 impressive losses to Miami and Texas A&M to open up the season, and they've been lights out the rest of the way, and they play Syracuse and Stanford. Notre Dame is pretty much a lock to be in the playoff. The issue with 7, 8, 9, 10 is you get into who's going to host a first-round game and who's going to have to travel in that first round. So we'll see what happens. By the way, I think the Iron Bowl, I think Alabama at Auburn is a tricky spot, and I think Auburn's got a chance.
Yeah, Jordan-Hare is the worst possible place you could be playing that game this year for Alabama. If you know the history of that rivalry in Tuscaloosa, it's usually blowouts in favor of Alabama, and Jordan-Hare is where things get really, really crazy. So they don't love being in that. You don't want to be in 10. Heading in at spot number 10, heading into conference championship weekend, because let's just say hypothetically it's Texas Tech and BYU in the Big 12 championship. Texas Tech is getting in. If they're a one-loss team heading into that championship round, they're getting in. So if BYU beats them, Texas Tech would get an at-large bid, which pushes everybody down. So the committee is kind of protecting Notre Dame, but Alabama would be 10. And if BYU gets the auto bid and everyone gets pushed down, Alabama's then on the outside looking in, and they just have their hands up saying, hey, what's going on here? So they don't want to be in that position, and you damn sure don't want to be playing Auburn in Auburn the final week of the season. Now, granted, I think this Auburn team this year is a little bit different just because they just fired their head coach, Hugh Freeze, a couple of weeks ago. So it's maybe not as scary, but Jordan-Hare is always a tough place to play if you're Alabama.
Tell me and tell everybody about the state of the ACC. My God, if Georgia Tech had not won that game in Chestnut Hill last week against Boston College, it would have been in complete disarray. But you've got 4 teams with 1 conference loss. How is this going to shake out?
So it's pretty simple. If Georgia Tech wins this weekend, they are in. If Virginia wins this weekend, they would feel pretty comfortably in. Georgia Tech definitively, because their final game is against Georgia. That does nothing for the ACC standing. So if they are 7-1, they are going to be definitively in. Duke losing is a sigh of relief for the ACC. There was a potential where if Duke ran the table, I think we talked about this last week.
Yeah.
If they ran the table and won the conference, I don't know that they would have been a lock to be in. The committee might have decided to go with clearly they like Tulane, who is the current projected champion of the American, and they might have decided to go with James Madison to the Sun Belt over an ACC 4-loss Duke champion Duke team. So right now it looks like it's going to be Georgia Tech and Virginia. Those two are the 1 losses that have the tiebreakers over everybody else. Pittsburgh, they didn't really need to win last weekend against Notre Dame, but they now get to play Georgia Tech.
So the Miami being at 13 in the highest ranked ACC team in the most recent rankings, that's almost placeholder-esque, isn't it, for the ACC champion?
Yeah, I was kind of a little frustrated. I understand why they did this, but I was a little frustrated at the mothership for just penciling in Miami, knowing that a lot has to happen right now for them to get into the conference championship game that they play in. I understand you're just going to take the highest ranked ACC team and pencil them in as the champ, but it's a very odd year to where they might not even play in the championship game, which would then make it relatively meaningless where they're ranked if they're not getting in as an at-large.
Yeah, because really their at-large chances are remote, super remote.
Right. They would have to have a lot of help, which is not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, if you just look at the teams that are ahead of them with like your BYUs and your Utahs, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that those teams lose and they move Miami up. And then who knows with Alabama, if Alabama loses to Auburn and then Miami jumps them as well. And you don't have any other shenanigans in the Big 12 championship game. So it's Texas Tech and they become a one-bid league. And then there's still an avenue for them to get in, but a lot would really have to fall in their direction. And you're relying on BYU potentially losing 2 games, Utah potentially losing 2 games if one of those plays in the Big 12 championship. And, Utah has Kansas State and Kansas, which is not exactly the most daunting final 2 games of the year. And then BYU has Cincinnati and UCF, which is also not the most daunting final 2 games of the year. So they're mathematically alive, but it's very slim.
How impressed are you with Oklahoma and 2 road wins against Tennessee and last week Alabama? Like, their defense is lights out.
They are so fast. I joke when I'm on Sirius that sometimes it feels like they're playing with 12 or 13 guys on the field, because at every single position, it feels like they're the fastest on the field. And they won a game against Alabama where they could really not muster up a whole lot of offense. Mateer's fine. He's not what we had hoped he was going to be or what we thought he was after that Michigan win early in the season. He's a good player, but they are a defensive first team. And what they were able to do to Alabama was really, really impressive. I'd seen what they did to Ole Miss and Tennessee, or rather what Tennessee and Ole Miss did to them through the air. But the way they stifled Alabama through the air, I thought was really, really impressive. That's the mark of a Brent Venables team.
Wow. So disciplined, so well coached. And as like you said, they are just so fast and swarm on defense and score, by the way, on defense. They still have, not the easiest finish with Missouri at home and LSU at home, but the fact that they went on the road in Knoxville and Tuscaloosa and won, they're sitting there as the 8 seed, and there may be a game in Norman in the first round of the postseason. So getting beyond sort of that magic top 10 in terms of at-larges and projected, sort of automatics, who do you like outside of that as having a legit chance? I've got one team in mind. I'm wondering if you have more than one.
I think the one team is probably similar. It's USC.
Yeah,
Big
definitely.
one this weekend against Oregon. That one's going to be on the road, but it's a 3:30 kick. Lincoln Riley's team has looked good over the past couple of weeks. They're certainly kicking themselves for the way that they lost to Illinois earlier this year and to Notre Dame. But they put themselves in a position where they can, if they beat Oregon, not only is Oregon falling outside of the top 10, but that's a good enough win for you to then catapult all of the teams that are in front of you right now. So I think if USC beats Oregon, and then they have to beat UCLA too, but if they beat Oregon, that'll be back-to-back top 10 wins or top 25 wins, with them beating Iowa, who's 21 last week. But then you have 2 top 20 wins, because that win against Michigan was 15th in the country. So that counts as a top 20 win. That would be a very nice resume that they would have with, if we're going to give Notre Dame the pat on the back of, hey, you had quality losses. Those losses that USC has, while they're kicking themselves, they're not nearly towards the top of the list for worst losses in college football this year.
I'll tell you what, I think that Utah, the loss at BYU is a shame, because I think Utah right now is a better team than BYU. And I think that they would have given Texas Tech a much better game in the Big 12 championship. If we see BYU Texas Tech again, it doesn't, based on the first one, it doesn't seem like we're going to see anything different. But I'm with you on USC. By the way, I like Jordan Maiava. I think he's a next level quarterback. I mean, they can move the football. They can score. This game Saturday is the game. So give me your best picks for this weekend.
So this is definitely a tough slate when it comes to gambling wise, because the SEC is in layup week. So we're outside of Oklahoma and Missouri.
Tell everybody what layup week means. Samford, etc.
Yeah, you get Texas A&M against Samford, which I don't even know if most books are giving you odds for that one. You get Georgia playing the mighty 1-9 Charlotte team. Hooray for that one. Alabama is playing the mighty Eastern Illinois, who is 3-8 on the season, they're basically paying these teams a large sum of money to beat up on them. So you're not seeing a whole lot of dynamic matchups in that one. Here's one that you like, that you will like. I don't hate Maryland covering 13.5.
Love
Michigan's
Maryland
a much
this
better
week.
team.
Love them this week.
But like they couldn't lay 11.5 against Northwestern. Offensively, they're still a little limited. So I like Maryland to cover that 13.5.
And Michigan,
Maybe
by
a
the way,
rebound.
if they get this win, they still should win. I just like Maryland's chances to hang in there with their defense against really an unimaginative offense right now and a little bit limited. But Michigan would go into that game with a shot if at home against Ohio State Saturday, Thanksgiving weekend. That would be a lot of pressure on Ohio State, and everybody would assume Ohio State would win, and they'd be every bit of what, a 17-point favorite in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I would say 15.
If we see 10,
sounds right.
if we see something like 10 before that game, I'll have everything I've won this year on Michigan in that game. But I think we're going to see 14 plus. All right. So what game? Maryland, you like? Who else?
Maryland.
How about
Maryland,
Cincinnati?
I was going to bring up Cincinnati, and I don't hate Pittsburgh. It's a short number. Pittsburgh's 2.5-point underdogs at Atlanta to play Georgia Tech. So I don't hate Pittsburgh. I'm interested in that Cincinnati line, as you mentioned. And I also just generally think Oklahoma is going to give Missouri the business. And that's less about Oklahoma's offense. That's just I don't think Missouri's going to be able to score against Oklahoma. So the Sooners laying 7.5. Maybe if you don't want to play that line, you just go play a Missouri team total under because they're not going to be able to score. But the best one would certainly be the Maryland and then the Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
maybe if you want
Pitt's really good, and Georgia Tech cannot stop anybody. All right, real quickly, because I've got 30 seconds. How does JMU get into the playoff field?
Well, they should have been at least in the college football playoff.
They weren't
this week. I was a little upset that they weren't. If Tulane loses, they should be in. Yeah, I don't know that the committee is going to love whoever, whether it's Navy, USF, Memphis, whoever. If Tulane loses in the American Championship, I would imagine that James Madison would get the nod, and they should. I mean, they're a really good team. Not a tough schedule. The Sun Belt's a little down this year, but they should get in with that.
Is their Sun Belt matchup against like Arkansas State or who is it, Troy? Who would they play? I don't even know.
That's a great. I would assume it would have been App State, but App State
Southern Miss right now is first in the other division.
And that's that doesn't move the needle. If it was App State, someone that we're very familiar with is the college football world, or like a Coastal, maybe you get something there, but not a lot of people are watching the Golden Eagles of Southern Miss.
All right, I got to roll. Thanks.
All right, see ya.
Denton Day, everybody. When we come back, you'll hear what Steve Suter said about Dan Quinn's called defense versus Joe Witt Jr.'s. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. This next segment of the show is sponsored by IHOP, introducing the IHOP value menu where all your breakfast faves are just $6 each every day. Where else can you get a big, filling sit-down breakfast for only $6? Go to your happy plates with the $6 IHOP value menu available every day at IHOP, $7 in some locations. So Steve Suter was back for another film breakdown on my podcast yesterday. Steve has been doing it for me all year long. Steve, the game analyst with Johnny Holiday on all of Maryland's football games, and Steve, one of the greatest punt returners in the history of college football. So one of the reasons he was excited to kind of watch this particular all 22 and break it down is he wanted to see if there was a big difference between the way Dan Quinn called the defense and the way Joe Witt Jr. was calling the defense. So at first I asked him just for his big takeaways from the game Sunday in Madrid.
Control the ball in offense.
Yep.
And they did that. So they did a good job offensively of keeping their defense off the field. They just couldn't punch it in there when they got inside the red zone, but did a good job of maintaining the run game, staying ahead of the chains. They didn't do much to hurt themselves by the way of penalties, holding calls, etc. They didn't have many negative first down plays. So you're doing well from an offense. You can keep your play caller and Kingsbury in rhythm if you're getting production on first down. So they did a decent job with that. They just unfortunately couldn't, cap those off with touchdowns. So offensively did what they had to do to win the football game until a couple of the key plays where they didn't make. And then defensively, thoughts are, I know we talked last week, and I'll start with it because it was what I was really interested in watching. It's just a difference in play calling. Would I notice a difference from Dan Quinn? Would there be different play calling situations that I could specifically point my finger to and say, yeah, that's different? They wouldn't do that. And the short answer to that question is yes. It was absolutely evident that a different play caller was calling plays to me. And you can start by just the simple of man or zone. Washington, and I'll say Dan Quinn specifically, he called no man coverage plays, almost none. I'm exaggerating a little bit. The first man coverage play he called didn't show up till the second quarter in the second drive, 13 minutes and 37 seconds into the second quarter. So the entire first drive, you're in zone coverage. And it wasn't just the same zone. He switched it up, cover 4, cover 6, cover 3, cover 2, cover 2, invert. So he was giving Miami a dose of zone, but giving them a lot of different looks so they couldn't really pinpoint it. Thought it was pretty clever. It was working from the passing game. Now, obviously, they had trouble stopping the run, but when passing situations, Dan Quinn was shaking it up. He wasn't putting his guys, who I think are a little behind in the secondary, of handling man coverage and handling the switching. We've talked about that for weeks. So kept them in zone, kept it easier for them to at least be in the right place. So you're giving yourself an opportunity to maybe be able to make a play, depending on if he's calling the right zone coverage for you in that situation. There were a couple other man coverages that showed up, but those were on goal line situations where he's trying to, bring the run blitzes with linebackers, right, trying to plug gaps in the short yardage. So I don't necessarily count those as zone or man coverage, but those were the only ones that were there. So it was predominantly man coverage,
primarily zone coverage, you mean?
Yep. Primary zone coverage, 90 to 95% zone. And that was not the case with Witt. There was a lot of man coverage, which caused a lot of mistakes. So it looked like Dan Quinn says, look, I'm going to eliminate those situations where my guys get crossed up in the secondary and we just blow the coverage and we're going to play zone. And they did it differently too. The cover 2 invert were some different looks. They had Reeves walk up on the line of scrimmage from a safety. Looks like a safety blitz is coming. Then they'll snap the ball. He goes out to be the flat defender. And they were dropping, like Noah would go to the safety, or with Sandstrom would be the safety in that cover 2 invert. That was a different look that I didn't see. The Jonathan Jones sack.
Right, the corner blitz. Yeah.
That was cover 2 invert. They ran cover 2 invert there, blitzing the corner. That's the first time they've done that all year. And that was on third down. So Dan Quinn was loving it. They probably installed that this week. We're going to run the cover 2 invert here, but we're going to blitz the corner. He's not going to see it coming. They're not going to expect it. And if they do pick up the blitz, they're not going to think it's cover 2 invert behind it. Very clever from his part. Probably installed this week. Calls it on the third down, and it works. You got to know he had to be hyped about that. So just different looks. It was a different scheme. They obviously installed a couple wrinkles there that I'm mentioning from rolling the coverages. So it was very obvious. I wasn't sure if it was going to be or not, but it certainly was. I think Sandra still looks more comfortable outside. I know it's a small sample here, but he looks more comfortable outside. He's in zone primarily. Like I just said, they were ran zone 90, 95% of the time. So not as easy to make a mistake. So you're putting him in a situation where he's more comfortable. I thought Noah looked good in the nickel. Again, not being asked to play man coverage, not being asked to cover body on press or anything like that. He's getting to sit in his zone. So I think it just makes guys feel better and more confident in their assignments out there. And I think that was just evident from body language. Now, I mean, Sanders Shill's not without making mistakes. He should have caught that interception, right? That hurts. And he's got other mistakes on the field where he's not making the plays you want, but looked confident. I like Noah in the nickel. You might have stumbled in. I mean, it sucks that you had to go through all the injuries to get here.
Well, that's sort of what it was last year. Sanders still on the outside. Noah I on was the nickel, was the slot corner.
Right. So I'm curious to me why they thought bringing in Lattimore and putting him outside with Amos and moving Sanders to the nickel was the best fit for the team. Again, one game sample size. So maybe in 3 weeks we're gonna be like, yeah, they don't look good out there anymore. But for this game, looked good, looked comfortable. I would have been experimenting with it. Maybe it's not an experiment because you said that that's how they played it last year. I would have been switching it up throughout this season the way Lattimore was struggling. and the way Sanderson was struggling in the nickel, it made no sense to just keep them there as long as they did. So, I guess you obviously can blame coaching there, but from the standpoint of putting players in a position to be successful, sure. I think it made more sense. They looked better, looked more confident. Zone coverage was working. The issues were up front with the run, and specifically on the edges. And Dan Quinn, even I saw his little halftime speech, said they can't set the edge. Nope, they couldn't set the edge. They couldn't set it last week. You run away from Martin. Even Martin, occasionally will get caught on not setting the edge. But usually you run away from Martin, and that would have been Holmes for the most part. Holmes couldn't set the edge early. And then when he was inside, wasn't really a factor at D tackle. So the run game suffered. I thought Bobby Wagner looked a little slow. Not his step was a little slow, especially when you're moving him east to west. Not as effective. He's more between the tackles linebacker these days, so he wasn't providing any assistance on those off tackles and sweeps. So the run game struggled. That's really where you were giving up most of your production to Miami's offense. But all in all, both sides of the ball, pretty good scores from my grading standpoint. Not a bunch of glaring guys that were just not productive and not doing anything, but not also, on the other hand, not a bunch of guys making outstanding plays either that were flashing on screen. So, it wraps down to overall, you're right there at the end of the game. You get it in OT. I think you should have won. I mean, we could talk probably for 20 minutes specifically on why Sanders still's back there catching a punt. So I don't know the depth chart. I don't know who's the backup punt returner. My guess.
Well, Jalen Lane got hurt, which is why he wasn't back there. So he was obviously the backup punt returner.
Right. I would assume, though, McCaffrey is probably the number 2 in that position.
Yeah.
He's hurt, too. So now you're looking at your third string, and maybe that is Sanders still, and maybe you have watched him catch punts in practice for this whole season. But I'm a firm believer, unless the guy is special, I'm talking special, you don't put a defender back at returner, either kick returner or punt returner. You have somebody that's comfortable, that catches passes all day long, every day in practice, just used to operating with the football, and is going to be more comfortable back there. So that blew my mind that he was back there. Debo would have been a better option for me. He's a body catcher anyway. I'm sure he can catch punts. And you just want to tell somebody in that situation, because you're going to get the ball around the 50. This is go out and fair catch the football. You don't even have to worry about making a return. And I bet that's what they told him. And he was still out of position. So he looked uncomfortable. I think that's a coaching mistake on the special teams coach, and maybe ultimately up to Dan Quinn. But you don't put defenders back there, in my opinion, unless they're special.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Like I'm thinking about defenders like from this team. D Hall was back there a bunch. D'Angelo Hall back in the day. I think you're probably right. It would have been McCaffrey, and if we had Eckler on the roster, I think Eckler would have been one of those options. Chase Edmonds was the kickoff returner in this game. A new name. Among all the new names this year. Maybe I wonder if he could have done it, but interesting. Yeah, it was a devastating play. They didn't give up points, but they didn't get the field position in a tie game, with 4 minutes to go. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're winning the game there essentially. I mean, you have I should
really
say
good chance
you win the game indefinitely, but your percentage is going way up.
Sure.
You're 80% to get the field goal attempt at worst. And if you're any type of competent, which the offense looked to be on that day, you're probably taking that down to low time on the clock, and you're executing that field goal to win the game,
right.
if not better, and getting a touchdown. So, sure, that's what I mean about players making plays that just weren't there when you need them. I mean, and on offense, Chris Moore, come on, that's the winning game, and you drop that pass.
Oh, my God.
For Mariota.
I'm so glad you brought it up. Because I said right after the game, I'm like, the Kenny Albert and Jonathan Vilma on the call, they totally whiffed on the fact that is a drop in the bucket throw, and he's trying to one-hand it for some reason.
Ridiculous. I can see the defender has a little light grab on his left wrist, but come on, man. You have to fight through contact, get that hand up, and make the play. And if the defender is grabbing your wrist to where it prevents you from your arm going up, then you're going to get the PI. So it was just a really unathletic, negative ball skill play that was to win the game. I mean, Mariota's taking a shot here. He's not settling for a field goal, and he drops a dime on Chris Moore, and it was a very unathletic play. Mentally made the wrong decision, like you just mentioned. You don't go up with one hand over that. You do everything in your power to put two hands on that football. And again, if you can't get two hands on it, it's going to be obvious there was a reason why you couldn't, and you're going to get the PI and you're going to have the ball in a 2 for a chip shot. So that was real disappointing.
Oh my God. I thought it was the best throw he made all day. And
Yeah,
here's another example of the injuries, because Terry McLaurin isn't a separation guy, but he's a contested catch guy. That's the catch he makes all the time. Now, I would ask you, because this final drive in regulation, which, by the way, I didn't have much of a problem with any of it in the way they managed it. They just didn't get that other – they needed another 5 to 10 yards. They ran the ball on first down there, and it didn't bust. So a lot of times, especially against nickel in that spot, you run the ball and you get 5, 6, 7 yards. That would have been, less than 50 on the field goal attempt, which is what you're looking for. The second down pass nearly got picked on that corner blitz where he almost got hit. Was there anything open underneath on that play where he went deep? Do you remember?
No, I think it was the right play. I mean, he's open. I mean, he's got to step on the defender.
Yeah.
And it is to win the game. No, I didn't see like a dink off there for that could get 4 or 5 yards. He should have took conservatively to make the field goal shorter. No, that was the ball. It was either that or it was probably try to scramble and get a couple. But again, the dude's open. It's the game-winning ball. I love that he took that shot. And it's no secret. Your kicker's been struggling. So get it as close as possible. I mean, that's the win the game moment. I would love to be a receiver, and you would think any receiver would want to be in that position to get a chance to win the game. And he couldn't have thrown the ball any better. You got to catch that. And he just had a brain lapse where he thought he could go with one hand. Just a foolish attempt at trying to catch the football. No, they should have won the game in regulation for sure.
The play before, we'll circle back to that when we go through Mariota. But yeah, I mean, I think it was because the kicker came on and missed from 56 and it went to overtime. The crew that was calling the game just completely overlooked the fact that ball was literally dropped in the bucket, and they would have had plenty of time to go down there, clock it with 2 seconds, 3 seconds to go and kick the walk-off field goal. Meantime, the field goal kicker missed. They waived him this week, and they brought in another kicker.
I did.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you real quickly in your defensive sort of takeaway, in all of that zone coverage, and then with the way they really stood up big time in the red zone and had 2, 4th and goal stops, and, they got a little bit lucky. There was a false start, on the opening drive. There was a wide open tight end that Tua missed, or maybe the tight end ran the wrong route. I don't know. But do you think overall it was a bend, don't break strategy, and let's try to make it happen in the red zone against Tua, who is not, Jared Goff and the Lions, or Sam Darnold with, JSN, et cetera?
Yeah, so I could probably answer that a couple ways. I will say not very impressed from an offensive standpoint of the Dolphins. Not dynamic, nothing really tricky. I think 85% of his pass attempts were all play action, so they relied on the run and they went to play action, and it just kind of seemed vanilla. I was looking forward to watching that film, thinking that the head coach is kind of creative, the young gun, going to draw these real dynamic plays, but I didn't see that. So kind of vanilla offensively, so that fits when you're trying to be vanilla on defensively to limit mistakes. I don't want to. It was a bend by don't break. Maybe the better way to say that, it was he just playing a percentage, Dan Quinn, of let my players at least be in the right positions to help them make plays versus I'm taking a gamble in man coverage, because every man coverage play that Washington's run all season has somewhat been a gamble. You don't know, A, if your guy's going to cover the guy because they've struggled in man coverage, or B, if they're going to provide any type of switching with accuracy and then maintain coverage. So I think it's taking a look at what I got. Let me put my guys in position, and then the way he did it. So he's running zone, he's playing safe, but he's doing it from different looks, and he's giving different pre-snap looks to Tua and different alignments, and he still ended up in the cover 2. And that's what I've always wanted and want defensive coordinators to do. I don't care if you want to run cover 2 8 times in a row. Just show it from a different look so that it looks different. It doesn't look the same. You can't let quarterbacks at the NFL level come up pre-snap, diagnose a defense pre-snap, and then post-snap it's the same.
Right.
I think they're just too good mentally, and then you're putting yourself in a bad spot. And they were doing that. Washington was too often, too frequently prior to Dan Quinn calling this game. So I'm going to be, again, I'm excited to watch the film next week. Was this just for Miami, or was this because he thinks this is the best way to be productive on defense? So time will tell if he's calling zone all again next week. Now you got to know the next team just watched you call 95% of zone coverages. Now they're going to prep for zone coverage. Now, do you sprinkle in mans on third down when they think you're running zone, and then maybe you win on that time too? So now you get the chess match again, right? The film is going to determine how these guys prepare. But for Dan Quinn, he did a hell of a job, I thought, preparing for this game and putting his secondary specifically in positions to be successful. And it worked for the most part. That they were just more stout up front. It could have been an even more glaring, better performance defensively.
That was Steve Suter. He had a lot on Marcus Mariota. By the way, Matt Gay, who missed that field goal and got released earlier this week, got picked up by San Francisco to their practice squad. He may be kicking for the 49ers this weekend. Up next, Paul Charchian. We'll talk some fantasy football and I'm sure a lot more. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Every week in this spot, my friend and a fantasy football all-time expert, Paul Charchian, joins us to talk fantasy football sometimes, but sometimes it's a lot more than that. Podcasts include Fantasy Football Weekly and Chop at Paul Charchian on Twitter. I was thinking about something, and I've talked to a couple of my guests about this topic this week. Defense is back in vogue in the NFL. In a passing offensive league, we've got some dominant defensive teams that are really leading the way. Teams like Denver, Philadelphia, obviously coming into it. The Rams and Seahawks both are dominant defensively. The Chargers are good defensively. Houston is unbelievable defensively, which has kept them, in the mix. What do you make of that? New England, by the way, the number one rush defense in the NFL.
Yeah, it's a little throwback right now. Also, many of the teams that you just mentioned have the combination of a good running attack. I mean, we really are in something of a throwback right now where, these teams that can play great defense and can run the ball, shocking, are doing well for themselves. And, we've talked about New England a few times. As great as Drake May has been, it's their run defense that is as big a reason for them being 9-2 as Drake May is individually. That's I think a really underserved story so far has been some of the running game attacks and the great run defenses that we've seen. You mentioned Denver. Denver's sitting at 9-2. I don't know if they can win a Super Bowl with their offense, but I know their defense is going to make them an extremely tough out as they're heading towards a possible 1 seed in the AFC West.
This kind of started. Look, Kansas City 2 years ago won the Super Bowl really led by their defense. Philly obviously was led by their defense, even though Jalen Hurts seems to, in every big game, play really well. And then this year, even thinking about teams that might not even make the playoffs, in part just because of disastrous quarterback situations. You look at Cleveland, that defense could have been considered all-time great had they had just a bad quarterback, except rather than just the situation they've had there this year. And it's not just their quarterback. They have literally no talent other than the rookie Judkins on offense. But yeah, it's an odd year in general because your top 3 teams in the AFC are Denver, New England, and Indy. You've got Chicago leading a division with Carolina a half game back. I know it's a year-to-year league and things change dramatically, but especially in the AFC, we've been so used to Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore, and the top 3 seeds may end up being Denver, New England, and Indy.
I hope so, because that's great. That's great drama. We like new faces. We want to see the old guard get challenged. I hope that's the case. And I'm glad you brought up Philadelphia, Kevin. The overarching storyline of their entire season has been the offensive struggles that they have had. A.J. Brown not getting the ball enough. Saquon Barkley looking fractionally as good as he did last year. They're 8-2. And they're sitting as the 1 seed along with the Los Angeles Rams in the NFC because their defense has remained really, really good. And as much of a passing league as we've got, and all the things that we do to make sure that fantasy box scores get filled, defense still wins games, man. That part of the NFL has not changed, which is great. Hey, you mentioned Cleveland. You want a sobering thought? How about this? Let's assume Shedeur Sanders is every bit as bad as he looked last week, which is not fair because he's got the right to get better, and he probably will. But let's just say that. Dylan Gabriel's concussion, pretty significant. Let's say he's out for a while. Next man up, Deshaun Watson.
No.
We may not have seen the end of Deshaun Watson.
Is he the backup this week if Dylan Gabriel can't go?
He's still on IR technically, but they are getting to the point where they're ready to take him off IR, which could happen in advance of this game. So we're not that far off of Deshaun Watson back at the helm of an NFL offense, and that's really, really deflating.
Well, I think the issue with Watson more than anything else, and I don't know this is just an NFL fan from afar, with what happened to him personally, I think he lost all of his desire to play football. I mean, we saw him last year here. He was a disinterested football player on the field, completely disinterested. And I think we saw that a lot last year. I mean, he's collecting all this money. He's not going to retire while he's injured getting paid. But I just don't think, based on what we've seen recently, and what is he now? Is he 30 yet? He's got to be approaching that.
Yeah, right in that ballpark. Maybe even a little older. Yeah.
So, I'm wondering whether or not Deshaun Watson even has a career left.
He can't, right? You'll recall his own owner just torched him in the summer, and had fessed up to it being a horrible move, and it's just hard to come back from that. But but if you're Watson, of course, to your point, you're getting paid so much money to just sit around in rehab. Of course, you're going to collect those paychecks. I got to wonder if he even wants to be on the field. I'll take issue with one thing you said, and it's a very minor phrasing, but and you mentioned what happened to Deshaun Watson. I would say what Deshaun Watson brought upon himself.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah,
I know you do.
Yeah, this is a guy that threw for nearly 5,000 yards, 30-something touchdowns, a few picks, and got traded. It's really one of the most unprecedented, availabilities we've ever seen. Forget about the ultimate trade, which was horrible because it came after all of the allegations and lawsuits. Cleveland didn't make that trade in advance of all that. They saw what he was. They saw what was out there, and they made the trade anyway, which is going to go down as one of the worst trades of all time. But it was unprecedented that we saw a quarterback, not even in his prime, approaching his prime with elite level talent be available, which should have been a major red flag to begin with.
He won Offensive Rookie of the Year, if I remember correctly, or he was nearly won it. Then went Pro Bowl, threw for the 4,800 yards you mentioned, and in that season ran for another 500 yards.
Yeah.
Had the longest average pass of 9 yards. He had a magical 2020 season that didn't result in wins. It was a 4-win season.
Yeah,
they were
banged up on defense that year, I think. Yeah.
Yep. Then all the stuff melts down. He is out of football for that 1 year where he's showing up at Houston practice every day, but they're not letting him do anything. He's just standing around. He's not running with the team. He's throwing balls to retire. And then the trade goes down, and I think people know the rest of the history on that. It's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable story that one of those things where if it didn't happen in real life, you would never script it because it's too implausible. And you hit this right on the head. He doesn't care anymore. The love of the game was sapped.
It looked that way
by him. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It looked that way. Yeah. It looked like the last thing he wants to be doing is going to an NFL facility every day. Back to Philly for a moment. I don't know how many of you out there saw this story, but there was a story in The Athletic that said that there is growing frustration, not just from A.J. Brown, but from basically the team that Jalen Hurts is coached to play differently. He's coached to take those opportunities and make the throws, the tight window throws. And we all watch Jalen Hurts every week. He'll hold it. He doesn't let it loose. And that he's playing, quote, his game, closed quote, instead of what they've game planned for. Now, this is the first time that it's now moved into the Jalen Hurts area publicly. Rather than it just being a receiver that's upset. You see that with Jalen Hurts. He plays not to lose. Now, they have a team that allows him to do that.
Right. Yes.
And then when they do need him, he actually has stepped up, against, the Rams last year, regular season and postseason. And he played the better Super Bowl in their loss to the Chiefs than Mahomes did.
Oh, yeah. Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
He was going to win. He was going to have had the Eagles won that. He would have won Super Bowl MVP.
Right.
And again, this is a 9-2 team whose offense is being dissected, and we've got all of this backbiting and rumors and storylines on a 9-2 team.
Yeah.
It feels like they're 2-9 coming off a Super Bowl, but they're still very much in the Super Bowl hunt because of the pedigree, the home field path that they're going to have, and the defense, which it started a little wobbly in the season, but has become very, very good. Kevin Patullo's absolutely on the hot seat, their offensive coordinator. He's going to be one and done if he's not careful. That's another part of this. Part of his job is to wrangle the personalities that he's got on this team that has performed at a very high level with a bunch of big name players, Barkley and Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I mean, great players and have performed at a high level. And part of what he's got to do is manage the personalities, make sure those guys get involved in their offense, feel like they're contributing for winning. That's, for right or wrong, that's part of the game. Vikings are suffering through some of that with Justin Jefferson right now as well.
Yeah.
It's not special to the Eagles necessarily.
So we have a Thursday night game tonight, which, it's too bad CJ Stroud's not playing because it would have been one hell of a matchup. Everybody's talking about, the league, the AFC teams want Indy to win. They want Kansas City to not be in the postseason. I would suggest very much to all AFC teams, be careful if Houston somehow gets into the postseason. They are an unbelievable defensive team led by Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson and others. And if they get Stroud back, if they were to get Mixon back at some point, I think they're really a dangerous football team. I've been talking about them for a few weeks. What do you make of them and then the matchup tonight from both a matchup standpoint in terms of who wins the game and then fantasy-wise?
I bet if we had asked people to tell us where Houston ranks in points allowed, most of your listeners would not guess number one, but that is where they are. They are number 3 against the run. At 84 rushing yards per game allowed. That's all. And Houston is number 3 against the pass at 171 yards. I mean, when you're top 3 against the run, pass, and points allowed, your defense is pretty good, and you can win every game. Now, can Houston win 3 consecutive playoff games? To me, no, not with the offense that they've got, because the offensive line is so bad.
It is bad.
That it's just, I can't see them surviving, some gauntlet of AFC teams that would pick them apart on a potential path to the Super Bowl. Davis Mills hasn't been that bad. In fact, Davis Mills has been no worse than C.J. Stroud through 3 games. The passing numbers are all better than what C.J. Stroud was doing, and I'm not gonna go so far as to say Davis Mills is better than C.J. Stroud. I'm not carving a bust in Canton for Davis Mills, but he's doing exactly what I would do as a backup quarterback if I were trying to help my team and also put some plays on tape to keep me in the league for years to come. He's throwing to Nico Collins. That's what he should do, and that's what he has pelted Collins with 11 targets, 15 targets, and 11 targets the last 3 games. And that's going to be one of the ways that Houston can be competitive in this game is Nico Collins as a difference maker. The Buffalo cornerbacks aren't great. None of them rank higher than cornerback 50 by Pro Football Focus. This is a nice opportunity for Davis Mills to keep hooking up with Nico Collins and see if your game changer can go, find some points, manufacture a victory that most people don't think is coming for Houston.
I mean, I would just remind you that they beat and barely beat the Tennessee Titans last week with Davis Mills. So let's I mean, the games that CJ Stroud played prior to that were Denver and Seattle and I think the 49ers who they blew out. They're better off with CJ Stroud being back, but this is actually a huge spot for them because at home tonight, if somehow they were able to pull it off against a Buffalo team that really isn't that great defensively, they'd be in very interesting position because, they still play Indy twice. They still have both of their games against the Colts in the AFC South. All right.
The other one other storyline for tonight for those that have, especially fantasy salient, dust off Woody Marks if you've got him on as a backup.
Yeah.
This is
He's been good.
Great opportunity. He's been good. Now, struggled last week against the Titans, and I don't have a reason why, but somehow Buffalo is actually a far easier run defense than the Titans. They've allowed the second most fantasy points to opposing runners. Last week, Sean Tucker rolled up 140 yards.
He was so impressive
on the Bills.
Impressive,
wasn't he?
Sean Tucker. The speed.
Yes. Oh, And he's got a bigger frame. He's not like, a one-touch, feather touchdown kind of guy. Game before Sean Tucker, Devon Achane rolled up 225 yards and 2 touchdowns against Buffalo. This is quietly why Buffalo is in second place in the AFC. Is they can't stop the run. And Woody Marks emerging as the go-to runner. That's going to be a fun angle to watch tonight.
All right. You put it in your notes. Charch sends, some suggested topics, every week. And Charch and I were always on the Kirk Cousins bandwagon. Charch is a huge Vikings guy, and he was, fighting the battles with the anti-Kirkers week in and week out. So he's now in for Michael Penix Jr. in Atlanta. He actually looked good last week throwing the football. He had, I think, 3 or 4 drops in that quarter and a half in overtime. And he'll be without Drake London. But how do you view him in Atlanta for not only this Sunday, but the rest of the year?
Well, first, I'll mention my Vikings got out when they should have got out. They did the right thing. It's not the same Kirk Cousins prior to the Achilles that he had with the Vikings. And most of we've seen has been bad, by the way. He's had 17 drives this year in and out of games for Michael Penix, 17 drives for Kirk Cousins. He has 1 touchdown in those 17 drives.
Yeah, he played the Miami game without taking all the reps going into it. I'm here to make some excuses for him. I actually am. He came in at the end of another game and handed off basically. If you watch the game, and I went back and watched, he looked as good as he's looked prior to the shoulder injury. Since post shoulder injury last year, when everything really fell apart after a great start to the year, he was firing shots. And Drake London had 2 flat out drops, one of which would have probably won the football game for him. And then he let him down the field for the game tying field goal. But anyway, continue.
The real issue is not around so much Kirk Cousins, but I think it's around what does this mean for Bijan Robinson, who's the one Falcon left that we really care about. We will Drake London, not going to play this week. My worry, fantasy guy, is every opponent is going to now play to stop Bijan Robinson and just take their chances on Kirk Cousins beating them. And this year, I went up and looked at what Robinson has done, Bijan Robinson has done in plays with Kirk Cousins this year. It's a small sample size. He's touched the ball 16 times with Kirk Cousins, 16. He's averaging 2.5 yards per carry, no touchdowns on those 16 touches. I'm just worried Bijan's going to have to be superhuman, which he can do, by the way. I mean, that's not an impossible task. He can be superhuman at times, but other times defense are just going to play to stop him, and we're going to see some dud games for Bijan, and when he just can't overcome mediocre play at the quarterback position.
Okay. We'll see. Look, they're limited this week against the Saints. Drake London has emerged as truly, a top 10-ish, top 12-ish receiver in the league, no doubt. All right. What do you gave me in your notes to talk a little bit about Shedeur Sanders. I mean, well, I guess we've already talked about it. Deshaun Watson could be the backup. What about the New England running back situation? Travion Henderson's been absolutely lights out, but is Stevenson coming back? Antonio Gibson? What's the story with their backfield?
Yeah, Gibson's done for the year, but Stevenson expected back. He missed 3 weeks with a toe injury. And from a fantasy standpoint, of course, we hate the convoluted backfields. We want a singular focus backfield. Clarity, right? Now that's all gone. Travion Henderson went berserk the past 2 weeks, finished as a fantasy top 4 running back in both games, Kevin. The prior 9 games, when Stevenson on the field, Henderson averaged out as running back 37. So the question is, and Mike Vrabel, he wants his players to earn their playing time with good play. Travion did some of that, but did he do enough to remain the starter? Vrabel's so old school, it's easy to see him going right back to the Stevenson timeshare. And Stevenson's not bad. He brings a lot to the table. He is a tough inside runner. If he didn't fumble so often, I think this would be even a simpler equation to figure out. But fortunately, the Bengals are coming up. So both Ramondre Stevenson and Henderson are both viable. In this case, I can see a scenario where both guys end up with good fantasy games. Bengals allowing the most fantasy points to running backs. It's not even close. They've allowed the most rushing yards and the most receiving yards to opposing running backs. So in this case, we're going to get to play both Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson.
Yeah, this should be this should be a 40-something to 30-something or 20-something final. I mean, there are going to be a lot of points in that one. All right, what else do you have? Joe Burrow. Is Joe Burrow going to be back?
Of that game? Yeah. Yep. It's looking increasingly like Flacco's got this shoulder injury. Flacco might be in worse shape than Burrow is with his toe.
Yeah.
Burrow's gotten in full practices this week. And now we won't have Jamar Chase to throw to, thanks to the spitting suspension. And by the way, Kevin, have you ever gotten so mad at somebody you've spit on them?
No, I don't think I have. I mean, I'm sure I did some stupid things when I was a young person, but I don't. Spitting is, as we all know, that's getting your, somebody's going to take a shot at kicking your ass if that happens.
Absolutely. You're ratcheting it up. Maybe this is the very first time in Jamar Chase's life he's ever goobed on somebody, it's a weird spot to do it when you've got hundreds of cameras on you, all eyes on you. You're on television. I don't know. This is the spot that I would want to do it in. I wouldn't want to be the DoorDash driver who delivers cold fries to Jamar Chase. I just,
what are you doing with J.J. McCarthy and Jefferson and Addison from a fantasy standpoint? I mean, this guy can't hit the ocean from a boat.
No, the accuracy is really bad. And when he's on the run, it's even worse. He's holding the ball too long. Pocket breaks down. Now he's on the move, and now we're throwing inaccurate passes. Is his overall body of work through 5 games in Minnesota is roughly equivalent to what Zach Wilson had done with the Jets through 5 games. Statistically, there's frustration mounting, as I alluded to earlier with Justin Jefferson. Unfortunately, Jefferson's been a little petulant, frustrated, disinterested, all things that we never associate with Justin Jefferson, who's been through a lot of quarterbacking ups and downs in his time in Minnesota. He had a great long run with Kirk Cousins, but short of that, and was able to get a lot done with Sam Darnold. But there's been he's gone through 8 different quarterbacks. So there's been a fair amount of tumult, but it seems to be hitting him in a way that it hadn't in the past. We've gotten to a point now where Justin Jefferson is not a fantasy auto start anymore. He has moved into that flex level. And then you're looking at your flex receivers and saying, I got a pretty good play at wide receiver. I don't know that Justin Jefferson is the guy that I want to start over Zay Flowers. There is, Michael Wilson for the Cardinals, who had an explosive game last week. He's sort of lost the benefit of the doubt to be an auto start as a, sort of tier 1 wide receiver. He's in the flex conversation now.
I want to finish up with the Cowboys, who play the Eagles Sunday. And trust me, if the Cowboys win this game, they're going to be talked about as look out, here come the Cowboys, because people are always looking to talk about the Cowboys. But are you as surprised at how great George Pickens has been this year as I am?
When CeeDee Lamb went down, we figured this passing offense would largely go through George Pickens, and so wasn't shocked at that time that Pickens was doing so well, particularly with the Cowboys defense being so bad, and Dak Prescott throwing his arm out of socket and throwing to Pickens all the time. But it felt very artificial and inflated because of all those things. All those elements had come together. Since then, Cowboys are playing in much closer games. They don't have to throw as much, and of course, CeeDee Lamb's on the field, and Pickens is still really good. And, he's, by the way, shockingly young. I want to say he's 25 right now. I mean, George Pickens, this could end up being, it was a 3rd round trade. The trade was a 3rd round. He's 24 years old. The 3rd round pick right now is looking brilliant. He's at 900 receiving yards, and we're barely past the middle of the season right now. It looks like a great move, a team that desperately needed a second receiver and somebody that could unlock downfield passing. The one thing CeeDee Lamb doesn't give you is the 28-yard receptions. George Pickens goes up and gets those balls, and he's been incredibly important for them. He's sitting on 83 targets already at this stage of the season. That says a lot about just how important he is to this offense. He is 5th in the league in targets.
Yeah, and they get, Sunday, a hell of a matchup. I mean, Adoree Jackson's been
Mhm.
playing much better recently. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, etc. Hell of a matchup Sunday. He's been so impressive. And look, you were taking on a guy that was a potential problem. I mean, Mike Tomlin doesn't get
Yep.
rid of a guy unless there is other stuff. But he's been outstanding. Maybe he's just an incredible front runner. We'll see. Thanks, as always.
Lots of fun. Talk to you next week.
Paul Charchian, everybody. Frank Schwab, Yahoo Sports, next. Tom Shad covers the Washington Commanders for the Washington Post, joined it right before the season started. He's been in the market before. He worked for the Times many years ago. You can cover, or you can follow Tom on X, on Twitter at Tom_Shad, SCHAD. You wrote after the Detroit game, interviewing some fans that had walked out of the stadium after they took an absolute beating against the Lions. You said, a lot of the reaction has all led to, quote, a sense of emotional whiplash for Commanders fans. Some are still riding the high of last season in the hope of a new regime led by principal owner Josh Harris, GM Adam Peters, and coach Dan Quinn. But for others, the fuzzy feelings are gone. Criticism of Peters and Quinn is fair in their eyes, if not warranted, and a familiar sense of resignation has returned. So I'm going to ask you the question we asked callers yesterday for about an hour plus, and that is, during this 3-8 loss season, what's the craziest, most insane sort of fan or media member or whatever reaction to this season that you've heard? Let me.
There have been quite a few.
Okay, yeah. So go ahead and list them.
I think a lot of the turning the page on some of the stuff that went so well last year, and that's kind of the whiplash of it for me. And I mean, I'm kind of coming at it from maybe a slightly different perspective, having just jumped on the beat here this year. But I've dipped my toe in like the Commanders subreddit, and the number of people that are not only questioning Adam Peters or Quinn, but are calling for like wholesale changes has been striking to me, particularly just because you look at where they were 9 months ago or whatever, in the NFC Championship game. And then you look at even when I started 3 months ago, there were fans who were saying this was a Super Bowl team. So that's kind of the whiplash, I guess, that I was hinting at. And I heard some of that in talking to fans, but some of that kind of just let's blow it up and start over stuff has floored me a little bit.
Yeah, so it's floored you. It's floored me too. I mean, we take a lot of the subreddit, callers on this show a lot. With the, Jaden's not very good, Mariota's better, fire Peters, his drafts suck, Quinn was the wrong hire. And we're literally now 10 months removed from 60 minutes away from the Super Bowl. I guess I have been surprised by it, but we also live in kind of this, era of recency bias. The last thing you saw was actually the thing, but what is your opinion of all of it? Do you think it's nuts? Do you think they're okay? Is this season, as Barry's Verluga wrote, your colleague at the Washington Post, more of a blip and last year being a fluke? Where do you come in on all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amping the stakes for year 3, I guess, is my biggest takeaway. And again, it's so weird that we're already talking about like 2026 before Thanksgiving in 2025. But I mean, to like, Barry's point about, which is kind of like the level for this leadership group. It's putting a lot more pressure, I think, on next year. And, presumably you're not going to have some of the same unlucky instances, injuries or otherwise next year. And so it is putting I just think a lot of pressure. And I also think it's going to be really interesting to see. This is like the first test, I think, here of how Josh Harris is going to proceed. This is kind of one of those moments where you see, not to paint with a bad brush, but you see some bad owners basically just pull the plug on something, like right away. And then you see other owners where they want to sit through it and give it time and whatever. And I guess I shouldn't characterize them as bad owners. I mean, you just see a lot of these franchises like, that haven't had a lot of winning, I guess is a different way to put it, where they're very quick to pull the plug on a coach or a GM and just kind of start from scratch and just do that over and over and over again until they hit one. So that's interesting to me. This is
Well, you don't sense
first...
that Josh Harris is going to be one of those kinds of owners, do you?
No, I don't. But I mean, this is the first. It's kind of easy, I think, for him to be the owner of the team when you're replacing Dan Snyder for one, and then you're in the NFC Championship game for two. But yeah, just kind of the amount of patience, I think, throughout the entire organization, and it starts obviously at the top with Josh, but then down through Adam and through Dan. I think that's going to be interesting because you've seen kind of patience play off, again, speaking in kind of broad strokes. You see it pay off in the long term, but it's a hard decision to make, especially when your fan base is so frustrated about things. And a microcosm of that would be like the Matt Gay thing, not to pivot to the kicker, but I mean, that's one where it's like, I got the sense that they wanted to be patient with him, and hope that things would come along. And then eventually we're at a point where they couldn't be patient anymore. And that's kind of, I think, overall, that's what gets really interesting when you have skids like the one that they're having.
You know what? I haven't given it a lot of thought, but when you just said that, they signed him to a pretty, hefty kicker deal in terms of guaranteed money in the offseason. They're 3-8. They believed in him to a certain extent. Do you think the lack of patience was in response to, hey, we have to do something? Joe Witt Jr. being demoted was the first easy thing. But is this more of a reaction to we got to do something, even if they don't really feel like it's the right thing to do? I hope that's not the case. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's maybe an element of that. It's tricky because, if you're Dan Quinn and you sit down and watch the film from that Dolphins game, you can go through all of the little, technique things on a specific play and whatever. But the truth ultimately is that if Matt Gay makes that kick, the losing streak is over. You're ending the bye week on a high. So it could have been as simple as that, just the circumstances. And he, for what it's worth, said that he and Adam Peters made this decision based on the performance over the course of the season, not just over one game. But there is some kind of momentum that comes off of that, right? And think about, not that, they're suddenly a playoff team if they beat Miami, but I mean, there are kind of some different vibes and maybe a little bit more hope, with getting some injured guys back, stuff like that, if they win that game. And so, I think, for all the ways that they're talking about it being kind of an over the course of the season thing, that was probably a particularly hard one, where as much as they wanted to be patient, it's like, man, if we had that kick or the one earlier, in the first half, if we had one of those made kicks, we could have snapped this losing streak and hopefully gotten the season pointed in a different direction.
Yeah, you just pointed something out, and we're talking to Tom Shad from the Washington Post, but you essentially just said it. They were really devastated Sunday in Madrid because that loss in a game that was winnable, and they played better on defense, and they felt like going into the bye week, that was something they really wanted to get to change the tone on this thing. And by the way, have people at least, from a long distance chance standpoint, not give up.
Yeah. And I think there was an understanding. I mean, at least from us kind of around the team, Seattle's a really tough matchup. Detroit's
Sure.
a really tough matchup. This
Right.
was more of kind of you're on an even playing field sort of situation, particularly on an international stage where you never know what's going to happen. And I think what made it so deflating was some of the issues in the fourth quarter that are not, it's not that they're not correctable, but it's like you can't overcoach to make sure that Zach Ertz doesn't slip on the field. Right. Or that Mikey Sanders still doesn't muff a punt, or that you miss a field goal. I mean, like Matt Gay could go back, and practice and try from 56 100 times and make them all and then miss in the game. There's just no easy way to fix it. I think that's what made it so tough. And obviously, they'll say, well, there are all these, other points in the course of the game where we could have played better and we could have made plays and not been in that situation, and all that's true. But like when you go back and you look at that game as a whole, it's like if you had one of those breaks go your way, it's different. And I think that's what makes it so deflating, for them. And then also obviously having this whole week to kind of stew about it before you have to come back and play another nationally televised game against Denver, which is obviously going to be another tough one.
Yeah, more like Seattle and Detroit. Yeah, we're talking to Tom Shad. You said something a little while ago about, next year could be a big year for the Adam Peters and the Dan Quinns with respect to how management views them. It's early. There's going to be a lot of context around around everything. They haven't even played their final 6 games of this year, and we don't know how those will go. But do you think right now, just your hunch, like they've got to turn in a really positive bounce back season, or they could be in trouble?
I don't know. That's hard to say, right? There's so many different factors that go into that, and I think it just what's interesting to me about it is the longer the more that they have kind of some roller coaster tendencies. It basically is just going to it's going to be interesting to see how all of those are handled and what the kind of tolerance level is for all of that. I don't think it's like, if they don't make the playoffs or they don't hit some, arbitrary benchmark that, Josh is going to clean house. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. I just think it raises the stakes a little bit because, again, just year one, everything's sunshine and rainbows and everything's great. And year two, it's, oh, well, we had a great year last year. And I think when you get to year 3, 4, 5, 6, that's where you kind of get a sense of, okay, are we trending organizationally from a macro level in the way that we want to be trending? And that's, I think, what's interesting to me about it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's interesting is that I still feel, and I think a lot of people do, but I think a lot of people don't, because, again, it's recency bias, that they have the most important position in the sport. They've figured that out. They have the guy. And this year is going to look more like an aberration because of the catastrophic run of injuries, and that they're going to come back with a lot of needs in the offseason, but that they're still going to be set up to have a chance to win more games than they lose more often than not over the next several years. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think the way that the league is now and the importance of that quarterback spot, that having one solves a lot of your issues, right? And so, I think there's a lot of stuff that they can do in the off season to strengthen, certain spots. And I think this is also like the rest of the season is going to be a bit of a learning experience for them, right? Of like figuring out who's in, who's showing certain traits and characteristics that they want to see, even when, the playoffs are out of the question, stuff like that. So yeah, but to have Jaden in place and to have that not be a question, at least for most of the sane world.
Most people not on subreddit. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, that's a huge question answered, and that is going to put them in a position to win. You need other things to come together, but when you have the quarterback, you have a shot.
So where are you on Jaden playing this year?
I think he will. I think he'll come back as long as he's medically ready to come back, and kind of given what we know about the injury, at least from what we've been able to glean, and the fact that it's his non-throwing arm, it seems like something that he should be able to come back from this year. And I think if he's healthy, he's going to play. And I understand kind of the fan sentiment and looking at it as like, the season's over, we have nothing to play for or whatever. But I think that kind of discounts how professional sports work and how these guys' minds work. You only get so many games in a year, and you only get so many seasons to play. And so I think, Jaden is obviously going to want to be out there. And, I think that they're going to have a hard time, particularly if there are multiple games left, holding him out when he's healthy and wants to play.
Do you have a hunch on when he'll be cleared?
I don't. And this has been a really interesting stretch, because he was not, he did not travel to Madrid. So we didn't see him. We haven't, gotten any sort of tangible update from Dan Quinn on sort of rehab work that he's been doing. From experts that I've talked to about this type of injury, again, broadly, not about his circumstance specifically, it's something that in a lot of cases, you reset the dislocated joint, and it ends up not being a huge thing, and you can stabilize. You need to have functional strength, in that joint, but you can stabilize that with like some sort of brace or something. And yeah, you basically just want to make sure that it's strong enough that you're not going to re-dislocate it and create a more serious issue. But again, particularly with it being his non-throwing arm, yeah, I mean, I think when I saw it live, I thought, oh my gosh, this is a season ender. And then the more that I've dug into it, the more that I've come to realize and has been explained to me that it's maybe not as serious as it looks when you see it live.
Talking to Tom Shad from the Washington Post. After Jaden and Terry, what's been on the long list of lost players, lost games? What's been the next most significant loss for them?
I think I would say Dorrance Armstrong. I mean, there are lots of, the Dietrich Wise one was huge. And I think because we only saw him for 5-6 quarters, that one kind of gets overlooked. I think that was a huge one. With Dorrance Armstrong, it was just losing another guy at that spot and where it's left them kind of at the edge position. And there was a lot of focus, I think, on his pass rushing and rightfully so with the sacks and all that good stuff. But I mean, he did a much better job than we've seen in the past couple of weeks of like setting the edge. Yeah. And I think, you wouldn't have seen like Achane, be able to have some of those easy outside runs like he had last week if you had guys like Dorrance Armstrong there. And so I think it was also kind of the psychological factor of like to lose Wise and then to lose his backup, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and then to lose another guy at that same spot. I mean, that was, I think, probably tough for the team to stomach in a similar way with like the wide receiver spot. So I guess for a combination of reasons, I'd go with him. But again, it's a long list and you can make a case for a lot of guys.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That position really turned what may not have been a good defense at all into an absolute horrific one. All right, 2 more to finish up. At the running back position, do you have any sense right now that they are becoming bigger fans of Rodriguez than anybody else?
I think, I mean, they've always said this publicly, and I think this is probably close to the truth that they're going to, ride the hot hand. And I think, Bill in the past couple of weeks just hasn't had as much explosiveness, and he hasn't been able to break some of those 10, 12-yard runs that, made him so good early in the season. And so, they figured, well, let's try Chris and let's see if we can grind out some more yards. And it worked out pretty well. Right. So I think, it's kind of his lead role to lose, I guess, at this point. I wouldn't surprise me for him to continue to get the bulk of the carries and then, see how it goes. But in terms of like, picking one over the other, I think they're just, this is working. Let's keep it going. And then if it isn't working anymore, Bill will get more carries, or it could be Bill in a limited role, breaking off a couple big ones. And then, his playing time starts to go back up. So it's a little bit of a cop out because that's more or less what they've said, but I think that is pretty close to the truth about how they're going to handle it.
Last one. Have you given any thought to who will replace Joe Witt Jr. in the offseason?
I have not. Though in fairness, I have not figured out what I'm having for dinner tonight. So I have not been able to think that far in the future. But yeah, and it is interesting. I mean, I was fascinated by the fact that they retained his title and kept him, kind of in the building, and just speaks to, I think, kind of Quinn's loyalty to guys and his relationship with Joe Witt Jr. specifically. Right. But yeah, I have no idea.
All right. Hey, Tom, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.
Tom Shad, everybody from the Washington Post, doing a really good job covering the team. Good guest, too, at Tom_Shad. We've got NFL Power Rankings, and Frank Schwab from Yahoo Sports covers the league. The NFL will have him on the show as well. Window Nation right now offering their end-of-year sale. What that means is 50%, he said, off of everything. Any window style, all windows, you're going to pay half price. And then if you choose to finance the purchase, 0% interest for 5 years. So you won't pay any interest until the year 2030. Window Nation's windows are insulated better than any others. They are proven quality. They'll save you money on your heating bills this winter, your air conditioning bills next summer. They've got an A-plus rating from the Better Business Bureau. That's real peace of mind when choosing the right company to upgrade your home. But customers are saying the same thing. Over 45,000 five-star customer reviews. Put an end to your window problems by reaching out to Window Nation. And that's really all I want you to do is if you've been thinking about, hey, we need new windows, we've got older windows, want our home to look better, give Window Nation a shot to come out and give you a free in-home estimate. You can do that by going to windownation.com or calling them at 866-90-NATION. 50% off all window and window styles, 1 day or less installation, and 0% interest if you choose to finance the purchase for 5 years. WindowNation.com to get started today. Let me mention real quickly, because many of you have tweeted asking if Houston's going to be a smell test pick tonight. They are not. There's a lot of public action on Buffalo. The sharp action is, from what I've been told, completely split on this game. Think about it. That line is not at 6. It's not one of those lines that just, if Buffalo were like a 3.5 or a 4-point favorite at Houston against Davis Mills, I'd probably be all over it. But as a 6-point road favorite, that means you'd be a 12-point home favorite. 9 on a neutral, 12 at home. I am passing on tonight. Top 5 teams. This, to me, is really hard. I'm going to just give you the 5 teams in order that I think are right now the best 5 in the NFL. I still think Kansas City could be in there sooner rather than later. But to me, the Rams are the best team in the NFL. They're number 1, followed by Philadelphia, followed by Seattle, followed by Detroit, and then Buffalo I've got at 5. Buffalo, Denver, New England, Indy. I don't know how to sort it all out. I give you 4 NFC teams as the best teams in football. I think that's what it is right now. To me, right now, the Rams are the best overall, especially with the quarterback and the head coach in that roster. And their record at 8-2, the impressive win. Look, their defense was great. Seattle's defense was great. Going to be interesting to watch them play Tampa this week. But there's my top 5. Rams 1, Eagles 2, Seattle 3, Detroit 4, Buffalo 5. Go ahead.
All right, so we got the same 1-2. I got the Rams and the Eagles up top, and then I've got 3 AFC teams that are hot right now, but may not end up doing so hot in the playoffs. So I got the Rams, the Eagles, then the Broncos. We got questions about Bo Nix. I have no questions about that defense. Then I got the Colts. I also have questions about Daniel Jones down the stretch, but that offensive line and Jonathan Taylor can run over just about anybody. And then the Patriots, we have questions about Drake May down the stretch and also their defense. So I got the Rams, the Eagles, the Broncos, Colts, and Patriots. Lions are on my outside looking in, and as are the Seahawks.
I considered actually the Patriots and the Broncos for 5 over Buffalo more than I did Indianapolis. I think, well, first of all, this game Sunday between the Colts and the Chiefs at Arrowhead.
Big one.
That's such a massive. This is a season-saving game for Kansas City, maybe?
Must win, I'd say.
Yeah, and for Indy, in many ways, it's a pretty big game. They were lucky to win the London game against Atlanta. They lost to the Steelers. Daniel Jones has been a turnover machine in the last 2 games. If he turns it over again 2 or 3 times and they lose, people are going to be jumping from the Indianapolis Colts ship.
And they got a tough stretch. They got Kansas City, Houston, Jacksonville. Then they play the Seahawks, Niners, and then Jacksonville and Houston again.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah, it's a brutal end. I actually feel better because of the schedule with New England. And Denver's defense is legit. It's going to be tough to beat them out there, man. It's going to be tough to beat them out there. And that's where they play the Packers, the Jags, and the Chargers. They still have to go to Arrowhead Christmas night. Frank Schwab from Yahoo Sports will join us next. We'll talk some NFL with him. Frank Schwab covers the NFL and sports betting for Yahoo Sports. We've had him on the show many times before. You can follow him on X at Yahoo Schwab. He joins us right now. So, the season, I looked on my text chain with you. We talked to you very early in the season, and here we are already in the last, third or so of the season. It flies by quickly. I wanted to start off by asking you something that I was talking to an earlier guest about, and that is, I think kind of we're watching almost a resurrection of defensive football in the NFL. The Super Bowl champion from last year dominated defensively through that postseason and in the Super Bowl itself. This year, we're watching unbelievable defensive performances lead to winning, Denver, obviously, Philly again, Seattle and the Rams. You've got teams like the Chargers who are good defensively. New England's the number one rush defense in the NFL. You have followed and covered this league for a while. Am I onto something or not? Or will offenses reign supreme when we get to the postseason?
It always helps to have one of the superhero quarterbacks. But I've always fought back against this notion that you need an elite quarterback to win a Super Bowl. That's not really true. There's many examples of teams either winning titles or coming really, really close where you can say, like Brock Purdy. Do we consider Brock Purdy an elite quarterback? I don't. I think he's very good, but he's not elite. They went to overtime.
But he didn't win it
a couple of years ago. He didn't win, but he went to overtime against the Chiefs. Come on. We're really splitting hairs here to think he cannot absolutely win a Super Bowl. So you go through it you can win in different ways in the NFL. You can build this thing in different ways. I would argue last year's Eagles were built as a running team that played defense. They had the best defensive football in many metrics, and they had a 2,000-yard rusher with a quarterback who can make plays. You can't be a zero at quarterback, obviously. You need a good offense. You need an efficient passing offense. But there are different ways to do this. And like you said, I almost think that the way we view the NFL now, and maybe it's because of fantasy football, and I'm a fantasy football player. I don't say that as negatively. But because of fantasy football, we downgrade teams that aren't good offensively, and we totally ignore the defense. And the main example is the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos are 9-2. Their two losses are with no time left on the clock at the Indianapolis Colts and no time left on the clock at the Los Angeles Chargers, two really, really good football teams. That's how close they are to being 11-0, and everybody thinks the Broncos stink. I don't think there's one person out there right now, casual fan. I'm based in Colorado. So there's many people around me who feel this way, but who think of the Broncos as a Super Bowl contender. I think they're just like, oh, the offense stinks. Of course, they're not a very good team. No, they're awesome. They're a great team. That defense is incredible. Yes, their offense has struggled. I'm not going to say they haven't. The Philadelphia Eagles, I think in another era, the last 2 weeks, they have given up 16 combined points to the Packers and the Lions. Yeah. I think in another era, we would be saying, whoa, look at that defense coming around the Eagles. But what are we talking about? Oh, Jalen Hurts stinks. A.J. Brown is complaining. Saquon Barkley hasn't gotten going. We're all these really, really good defensive teams up near the top of the standings, we're giving no credit to them whatsoever. And I think it's just, honestly, a lot of it is just we're so focused on offense and offensive players. And maybe that's fantasy football. Maybe it's just the over-reliance on looking at quarterbacks and assigning quarterbacks records, which I absolutely hate. That we just don't see the full team value of these squads. We just see, oh, their offense stinks, so they must stink. You told me the Denver Broncos aren't a good football team? Okay, well, that's fine. I'll keep betting them and keep cashing on them because that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, they've cashed a bunch. By the way, on your comment about, needing the great quarterback, I think because we have this conversation all the time and have for years. I think you're right. Even though, honestly, in terms of winning a Super Bowl, Nick Foles would be the only example. You're right that others have gotten to the Super Bowl without necessarily an elite level quarterback. I think the better way to put it from my standpoint, maybe you agree or disagree, is still your best chance to be a sustained over a long period of time contender is to have an elite quarterback.
Oh, I think no doubt. I think that has to be it. I would never argue that because look, it makes everything easier. It's the cheat code. If you have a Mahomes, an Allen, a Lamar Jackson, everything gets easier. Roster build, you can cover up so many flaws with an elite quarterback. But there's 5 of those guys walking the planet, right? Like, and if you don't have one of those 5 guys, how can you make it work? How can you turn yourself into a Super Bowl contender? And I think that there are ways to do it. Like, and I hate like being over reliant on, the Detroit Lions didn't win a Super Bowl last year, so that proves. No, they're a 15-2 football team that had a bad day because of a lot of defensive injuries. Right. Jared Goff is not an elite quarterback. He's very good in the system. He's very good at what he does. He's not one of those 5 guys I just mentioned. They went 15-2 last year. Like there are still ways to build championship level football teams in the NFL without the elite quarterback. But you're absolutely right. Having one of those dudes like Drake May might be graduating into that class, and Jaden Daniels, if he can stay healthy, might be in that class. If you have one of those guys, it means you're going to be a contender every year, generally, unless you're the Cincinnati Bengals. And it usually means that life is just easier with everything you do.
We've had a wild year, right? I mean, we're sitting here, entering week 12, and Denver, New England, and Indy right now are the top 3 seeds in the AFC. The NFC, we've got, obviously, the Bears leading the AFC North, and Carolina's a half game back in the NFC South. I'm going to go through a list of teams, and I want you to tell me whether or not you think they are a legit Super Bowl to get to the Super Bowl contender or not. I want to start in the AFC with Indianapolis.
I think the answer has to be yes, because all they've done is play solid, good football. Like, what more do we ask of the Indianapolis Colts? Like, they've beat good teams. They've played well against good teams. They should have won at the LA Rams, who we all love. Doubting them at this point is just, do I really, truly think that Daniel Jones is making a Super Bowl? No, honestly. But okay,
well, doesn't that answer the question?
It does, but why should I doubt it? Why should anybody doubt the Indianapolis Colts?
His last 2 games?
I guess, like, everybody's allowed a bad game. Again, he's not one of these 5 guys walking the planet who could he's just immune to this. He's going to have bad games. Sam Darnold's going to have a bad game. Like, it doesn't mean that I throw him out and just say, no, they can't do it. I think at some point you just have to tip your cap to the Indianapolis Colts and say, I don't really understand this, but the results are the results, and I have to put them in that contender class.
I think point differential is always something to look at, and they're still, number 1 in the league. It's been very impressive. So it sounds like you are an absolute believer in Denver, in their ability to potentially get to the Super Bowl out of the AFC.
Absolutely do, because they have one of the top 2 defenses in the NFL, Houston being the other. They have a Hall of Fame head coach. And I just sit here, and I know I shouldn't be saying this in mid-November, because if it was going to happen, it's going to happen. But I still sit here and say, Sean Payton is going to figure out this offense at some point. I just can't imagine Sean Payton going through a full season with this bad of an offense, because it has been bad. I'm not going to say it otherwise. But I also lived in Denver in 2015 when they turned one of the best defenses in the NFL and a really, really, really bad offense into a championship team. I think they're going to win the AFC West. And when you have a defense that good, their special teams have been pretty good. They have a great head coach. And we have seen Bo Nix play good football. He did last year. And he has at times as your fourth quarter against the Giants. I thought he played a pretty good game last week against the KC, even though they didn't light up the scoreboard. Yes, I do believe in the Broncos. I think that they can beat anybody in the AFC.
Patriots.
No, I just don't. Other than they might moonwalk their way into the number 1 seed, and then anybody with 2 home games to a Super Bowl obviously has a shot. But team-wise, I don't think their defense is good enough. I think they're good, but I think their schedule is carrying a lot of that water. It wouldn't shock me if they made a Super Bowl, because, again, if you're the number 1 seed, like, your path is really, really clear. But I have to pick one or the other. I'll say pretender on them.
Who wins the AFC North?
Oh, I think the Ravens win that by multiple games. Still, I think they sweep the Steelers. If you look at the Ravens' schedule, it's like, who do they lose to? They lose to the Jets this week? No. I mean, I think and not only do I think the Ravens win the AFC North, I think the Ravens win the AFC. Period. I think they're going to Super Bowl.
Wow. What a turnaround that
Got
would be. That would be the first ever 1-5.
They have the best player on the planet. I mean, he is. I mean, you could argue Mahomes, that's fine, but Lamar, like, I think that it's just one of those. They just got off to such a bad start with the schedule and the injuries and all that. I trust John Harbaugh. I trust Lamar Jackson. I think they win that division, and it's one of those karma things where it's like the times they were front runners and they couldn't get it done. Well, now everybody kind of gave up on the Ravens as a Super Bowl contender. You're going to look up and say, oh, wow, the Ravens have already clinched the AFC North, and we haven't even gotten to Week 18 yet. Like, that's going to happen. And I think at that point, the Ravens, it's almost house money at that point for them, and I think some of the pressure might be off.
It's interesting because I get it. Like, it's the Ravens, it's Lamar, but they could have. If Dylan Gabriel doesn't leave that game, the Browns probably win that game. They were in a close game with the Vikings. They should have been down at halftime in Miami. I just think defensively they're terrible.
And that might be true. That might play out. I think they've played better on defense. And last year they figured it out on defense as they went. They moved Kyle Hamilton here and there, and they kind of figured out their formula. I know last week was just a tough matchup for them against the Browns. The Browns' defense is great.
Oh, it's so
fantastic. Good. They're playing in a windstorm. Like, it was just destined to be an ugly game. The Browns have really played the Ravens tough the past few years, as bad as the Browns have been. So I just thought that getting out of there with a win was fine. Okay, you got out of there with a win. Make no excuses. Nobody was doing the opposite when you were losing games, that shouldn't have lost early in the season and saying, well, that's okay. The Ravens should have. No, at this point, style points don't matter for the Ravens. Get the win, be happy with it, move on. I think, if you look at their schedule, there's a real path winning out. Like,
they're going to be favored. We did this the other day. They're going to be favored in every game other than probably at Green Bay, and then we'll see if that at Steelers at the end of the year ends up meaning anything. But like you said, if they run through this next easy part of the schedule, they could potentially have it clinched because Pittsburgh's schedule is more difficult. I still am giving the Steelers a chance. Real quickly on Cleveland. I forget who I asked this to yesterday or the day before. Is Myles Garrett the greatest defensive player of this generation, or is it Aaron Donald? A. B, will we think of Myles Garrett when his career's over as one of the greatest defensive players to ever live?
We should. I mean, let's say he goes, and I think he's probably going to do this. If he goes on and breaks the sacks record, and he might break it, not just inching past it, he might get to 25. Like, he's having an all-time season this year, and it's crazy that the Browns have 2 wins with literally what might be the greatest individual defensive season ever. Is he the best defensive player of his generation? No, I'd still take Aaron Donald and J.J. Watts in that conversation too.
Yeah,
but he's obviously up there. If you're talking about this century, who are the best defensive players? I think the 3 answers are Aaron Donald, J.J. Watt, and Myles Garrett in some order. I mean, and that's pretty high praise. First ballot Hall of Famer. And I do think that, if he continues this career path, and I think if he has that one season where, remember that 25 sack season for Myles Garrett? I don't think anybody's going to do that again anytime soon. Like, that would be ridiculous. And he's on pace for it. Like,
yeah,
I think he needs 8 sacks in his last 7 games to break the record.
He's had a 5-sack game and a 4-sack game. He might get to 25 in 2 games or 3 games. I mean,
it's kind of unbelievable. Like, it's crazy how well he's playing. Just a dominant force. Yeah, I think he does go down as one of the truly great players. Like, he'd be considered maybe like a Bruce Smith, where when we talk about when we say who's the greatest defensive player of all time, I don't think many people say Bruce Smith. But when you bring up Bruce Smith, people are like, yes, absolutely, he's one of the all-time greats. Like, I think Myles Garrett would be that. I don't think anybody would be like, yes, he's better than Lawrence Taylor. But I think he would be up in that conversation of, oh, yeah, that's not a guy who just snuck into the Hall of Fame. Like, that's a guy who he's on the top of the pyramid of the Hall of Fame.
Well, as Belichick would say, we're talking about LT here. We're talking about 56.
Yeah,
that, for my lifetime, and I bet yours, like, to me, not only the greatest defensive player I ever watched, maybe the greatest football player of my lifetime of watching, but God, is Myles Garrett a true all-time game wrecker. I mean, and to your point, it's like, how bad do you have to be on offense to have only 2 wins with Myles Garrett? And by the way, he's not the only guy on that defense. It's crazy.
I know, right? Schlesinger's going to win. They're going to win.
He's going to win Defensive
Player
Rookie
of the
of the Year.
Miles Garrett, and Schlesinger's going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year, and they're going to go like 3-14. It's unbelievable.
NFC wise, give me the rundown in the North when all is said and done, first to fourth.
I still think the Lions are the best team, and so I got to ride with them. I know they've had some head-scratching games, but that's still the best team to me. I watch the Packers week in and week out, and I'm like, are you going to put a team away at any point? There's 5 minutes left to go in this Giants game. The Giants are on their third quarterback of the year, and you're losing? Really? That seems to be every week I watch the Packers, and I'm left so cold with them. I'm left like, why aren't you guys better? Like, what is holding you back from just eating the heck out of a team?
Is it Jordan Love, or is it the lack of receivers? What is it?
I think it's partially the injuries. Yes, I think a really short receiver. We've completely forgot they missed Jaden Reed all season. He's a big part of what they do. Tucker Kraft, obviously, they've had offensive line injuries. I think part of it is Jordan Love. I think part of it is Matt LaFleur's very, very conservative. And this season, I don't think he's having his best year. The talk of him being fired is one of the dumbest things I've heard this season, but he's not having a good season. So it's just a combination of everything with the Packers where I'm just like, I want to look up one week and be like, oh, the Packers are up 35-zip. Okay, that makes sense. Because it hasn't happened since week 1. I mean, they struggle along with the Arizona Cardinals. They need a 4th down in the 4th quarter just to win. It's crazy. But I still think they finished second because I don't think the Bears are this good. I just don't. Look, the Bears, negative point differential. If you follow DVOA, which I do, they're 25th. They're a bottom 10 team in the NFL on DVOA. They're just winning a ton of close games. And good for them. That's great. That's a great season for them to have this hope with Ben Johnson and things are getting better and Caleb's getting better. That ain't a playoff team to me. They ain't make the playoffs. And I think the Vikings finish 4th just because J.J. McCarthy ain't it.
All right. A couple of quick ones to end it up, and I appreciate the time. First of all, do you perceive Kansas City hosting Indy as a must-win for the Chiefs?
A little bit less than a must-win, but at times it's getting early, or it's getting late early. Is that what Yogi Berra said? It's at some point the Chiefs can't keep losing games. Like, I view them. If you look at their schedule's actually not that bad. Like they do play the Chargers and Broncos and Colts, but all 3 of those games are at home. Their road games are winnable, all of them. I think they got to go 5-2 to make the playoffs. That they could put them at 10-7. And so even if they lose this game, you say, well, okay, now they got to go 5-1. Well, you got to go 5-1 in the NFL. It's not an easiest task when you're a 5-6 football team. So I think it makes life a lot easier if they win this game. I don't think they're eliminated if they lose. I'm going to leave that light on until I see across my screen Kansas City Chiefs eliminated from playoffs. I'm not really going to sit here and tell you that I think they're done because it's the Kansas City Chiefs. And I don't think this team is that much worse than last year's team. And I know that sounds
I agree.
They were 15-2 last year. Now they're 5-5. And I'm sitting here saying, they're kind of comparable. The only difference, and people know this, absolutely everybody knows this, 11-0 in close games last year, 0-5 in close games this year. Like that's the pendulum just swung too far. It was way too lucky last year. It's way too unlucky this year. But the quality of the football team, I don't think is that much different. I just think that at some point the Kansas City Chiefs will get on a roll, and I do think they're going to win 5 out of 7 to end this thing. And I do think they sneak into the playoffs as a 7 seed. And the old cliche, who wants to play that? Who would you trust more? If the Chiefs are in at that 7 seed, start going down the AFC list. Do you trust them over the Colts? Yeah, I do. Do you trust them over the Patriots? Yeah, I do. Do you trust them over even the Ravens?
That's probably their
the
first round game, right?
The
2 seeds probably New England or Indy or potentially Denver. But yeah, I think, if Mahomes goes into Foxborough or goes into Indy in week 1 of the NFL playoffs, everybody thinks Kansas City's winning that game.
Everybody, even if they play the Broncos, who I just talked very highly about.
Yeah.
In a playoff situation, am I really going to go against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid? No, probably not. Like, they could absolutely get the 7 seed and make a Super Bowl.
All right, I got a minute. Dallas and Philly Sunday. If Dallas, first of all, do you give them a chance? Secondly, if they win that game, are they in the thick of it in the NFC for a wild card berth?
I think no one know. That defense sucks. Like I don't care that the Dallas Cowboys pounded Las Vegas Raiders.
Right.
That told me that was just
Quinnen Williams was Cowboys, awesome though in the game.
He was really good. He's a really good player. The Cowboys' 4 wins this year are the Giants, the Jets, the Commanders, and the Raiders. Come on. Yeah. Like, what are we doing here? Like, if they beat the Eagles, sure, I'll say, okay, well, maybe they're getting things together. But I don't think the Cowboys are good. I think they beat up on the Raiders in a Monday night game that everybody watched, and now we're like, ooh, the Raiders stink. The Raiders are terrible.
Yeah,
And that's all that win was. That's all it was.
All right. What's the national view? What's the, Yahoo Sports view of Washington's dismal 3-8 season?
I just look at it as regression hit. They were out over their skis last year. Fun season, awesome season. I'm not taking anything away from them. But I think if you look at it, there were Hail Marys and overtime games and beating the Eagles with 7 seconds left and all these beating a lot of bad teams. The schedule helped and making like 83% of their fourth downs and all these regression things just hit at once. And there's been the injuries. I don't think that much less of the Commanders right now. I think it's just been a bad season. And I think give Adam Peters a full off season and keep Jaden Daniels healthy. And I think they're going to bounce back next year and be just fine.
Frank, thanks. Enjoy reading you. Take care.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Frank Schwab, everybody from Yahoo Sports. That's it. Tomorrow's a Football Friday without our team having a game, but we'll have a lot, including smell test picks. Chris Russell's next.